There's something a bit strange about how most people approach lucid dreaming. And you probably know it's all the usual stuff. You check your hands, you look for weirdness, spot something unusual in the dream. And the logic is, if you can catch a glitch, you might just wake up inside of it. And fair enough, it sounds reasonable. But the more time I've spent looking at dreams, both my own and those of my students, the more I've realized something quite odd. The thing that gives away a dream often isn't anything you can see. In fact, the real giveaway is hiding in plain sight. It's not in the environment or your hands, but it's inside your own thoughts. And weirdly, other than reality checks, almost nobody talks about this. It's as if we've all become obsessed with the visuals, the dream signs, the scenery, and forgotten to look at the very thing that dreams are actually made of. And it's not images and it's not storylines, it's thoughts. And I know that might not sound like much, but when you know how to notice your thoughts, and I mean to really notice them as they're happening, something really quite amazing starts to happen. That awareness carries into your dreams, and dreams really don't stand up very well under that kind of scrutiny. So in this video, I'm going to share something I've used myself for years. More importantly, it's something that's worked for my students as well. And genuinely, it's a surprisingly powerful technique. It's something you can do today to lucid dream tonight. The problem. Okay, so here's the problem. Most lucid dreaming advice, and there's a lot of it out there, tends to focus almost entirely on what's going on around you. You check your surroundings, you look for oddities, you notice if anything looks strange. And it kind of makes intuitive sense because dreams often look odd. So the idea is if you spot the weirdness, you'll realize that you're dreaming. But the trouble is, dreams aren't films. They're not being shown to you. They're being built by you. They're constructed from within. And what they're built from, more than anything else, is thought. So I'm not necessarily talking about language or inner dialogue, even though that does play a part, but the raw mental stuff, your expectations, beliefs, emotions, assumptions, memories, fragments of your day. They're all swirling around into the illusion of a world. But the thing is, we rarely notice thoughts directly. We just notice the results of them. We might feel the mood, we might act on the assumption, and we'll follow the narrative. But the thought itself, we just are it. And that's the problem. Because you can't wake up inside a dream if you're completely inside the thought that's generating it. I suppose it's kind of like trying to spot a lie while you still believe the lie. So instead, we end up relying on visual dream signs or memory tricks, and we ignore the one thing that's always present in every dream. Thought. And it's not because we're stupid or lazy, it's just because thought is hiding in plain sight. We're like a fish in water. And unless you learn to see it, lucid dreaming will always feel a bit hit or miss. The science. So let's take a moment to talk about science, because there's a term in psychology that anyone who's familiar with this channel will know that describes exactly what we're aiming for here. Metacognition. And to put it simply, it means this: the ability to notice that you're thinking. So not just having thoughts, because we do that all the time constantly, but actually noticing them as they're happening. You can think of it as a kind of mental mirror, a shift from being inside a thought to observing it from the outside. And that subtle shift, it's one of the strongest predictors of lucid dreaming. It's your ability to recognize thoughts as thoughts. So when dream researchers have studied experienced lucid dreamers, metacognition is what stands out. It's the underlying cognitive skill that seems to make the biggest difference. And that might seem weird. You might think it's motivation or attention or practice. And even though those help, metacognition is best. So if you've ever had a moment where you're suddenly aware of a mental spiral, so maybe you catch yourself catastrophizing or arguing with someone who isn't there, and then there's this brief flash of metacognition. That's what it feels like, a flash of insight. Here's where it gets interesting for lucid dreaming, because that same mental muscle, the one that lets you notice your own thoughts in waking life, can carry over into your dreams. And when it does, things suddenly start to make sense, because the moment that you see a dream thought clearly and don't just follow it, that you recognize it as mental activity, you become separate from it, something bigger than it. And here's a thought. If you're no longer inside the dream's thought, then where are you? That's lucidity. How thoughts hide. Thoughts are really sneaky, but not like some cartoon villain, but an automatic, everyday sort of way. They blend in, they camouflage. You don't see thoughts because you are your thoughts, especially in your dreams. Because there's no distance and no moment where a thought politely raises its hand and announces itself. It's just there, it's embedded and it's running the show. So you might find yourself dreaming that you're being chased through an airport and it's like wading through sponge cake. But the thought beneath it might be something really dull, like, I forgot to reply to that email, it's really important, I've got to get there in time. But that's because that's what thoughts do. They technically build the entire landscape of the dream. It's not just the visuals, but it's the logic, the plot, it's the role that you play, the urgency that you feel in the airport, but they're also the way that we explain things to ourselves when we're in the dream. They're so utterly embedded, so normal, that they're basically invisible. Think about it. Think about the tone of voice in your head, or the assumption you make when you walk into a room. You don't question those things. They're just there. That's just how they are. But that's also what makes thoughts such a perfect dream sign, but also a dangerous one to ignore. In that moment, that exact moment where you spot a thought as a thought, not as truth or reality, then the spell of dreaming breaks down. It's essentially like breaking the fourth wall, like when you're at a play and you suddenly notice the lights. And suddenly you realize, oh, it's a story, I'm just watching a story. So, once you start seeing your thoughts, you start waking up. The cafe of the mind. Right, so far this might seem a little bit vague and a bit psychobabble, so let's try and make it a bit more concrete. I want you to imagine you're in a noisy cafe. So there are people chatting, there are plates clinking, there's some guy explaining cryptocurrency to a date that obviously regrets being there, and you're not really paying attention to any of it. It's all just background noise, it's kind of like a hum or geese chattering away. And then suddenly, somewhere in the distance, you hear your name. Not someone shouting, it's just said casually by someone over there on another table. But instantly, and without even trying, you tune in. So that's the moment we're aiming for. That's the skill you're trying to develop. You're not trying to silence the noise in your head, and you're not trying to analyze it. You just need to recognize it. And then your mind will instinctively snap into awareness. And thoughts are just like that, like cafe chatter. They're always swirling around in the background of your experience and skull. We don't really hear them directly, we just follow them, we react to them, and we believe them because we are them. But the moment you learn to hear them for what they are, just thoughts, not facts, then you create a little crack in consciousness, a little wedge of distance. And that crack is what allows your awareness to slip through. In waking life, we've got a whole bunch of words for it. Mindfulness, self-awareness, critical thinking, critical self-awareness. But in dreams, it's basically the beginning of lucidity. Right. So now we've got all the pieces in place. You've seen how thoughts shape dreams, how they hide, and how your awareness of them is going to change everything. So how do we turn that into a practical technique? The technique. So, before I tell you what you need to do today to lucid dream tonight, firstly I have to do a quick shout out to my channel benefactors, the people who keep this channel running. Today's benefactor is Stephen Rice. Thank you, Stephen, for supporting the channel. And if you want to be mentioned in a future video, become a channel benefactor. So here's the technique, and it's really simple. It's called naming thoughts. And it's going to sound simple, but it's going to be a lot harder to put into practice than you think. And like almost everything useful, it only works if you actually do it. And there are just 3 steps. Step 1. Begin the moment you remember. So from now on, as you're watching this or later in the day, just start paying attention to your inner world. The trick isn't to stop thinking, because you won't do that, and definitely don't judge your thoughts. Just gently observe them. And every time you notice a thought, give it a label. Just one word, and quietly in your mind. So things like judging, worrying, planning, remembering, imagining, comparing. It doesn't have to be complicated. You're not analyzing, you're not trying to change anything. You're just noting it. Just think of it like being a scientist jotting down notes. So, a thought arises, you give it a name, that's it. Step 2. Do this as often as you can throughout the day. Okay, so you don't need to be perfect. This isn't a test. But the more you do this, the more your brain builds the habit of watching thought instead of just blindly following it. And it's the habit itself that's important. You don't need perfection or intensity. It's just basic repetition. Essentially, you're just developing familiarity with your mental landscape. So you could think of it like mental subtitles. And it's not going to be easy straight away. If you keep practicing this for a while, you'll notice something strange. So you'll be going about your day, and without effort, labels will start to appear. Daydreaming, planning dinner, getting annoyed. Just little flashes of clarity about what your mind's up to. And in that moment, something will click. Because once you see a thought, you're not inside of it. And that little shift, however tiny it is where lucidity begins. Step 3. Let it follow you into sleep. This is the bit you don't directly control because it's going to happen all on its own. But if you build this habit during your waking life and you do it consistently, not overdoing it, it will start to show up in your dreams. So you'll be in the middle of some random dream scenario, all tangled in the weirdness. And suddenly, there you go, a thought, and you notice it, and you label it. Worrying, running away, pretending. In that moment, that tiny gap between the thought and the observer, a little shift happens. You're no longer a character in your own dream. You've become the witness, the observer, the lucid dreamer. And the nice thing is, this is a habit you can practice right now, today. You don't need to change anything about your routine, and you don't need to wake up at silly hours of the night. That's it. Name your thoughts. The naming thoughts technique. It's not flashy or complex, but it is incredibly powerful because it trains the real skill behind lucid dreaming. Metacognition. And maybe you'll notice a thought in your mind right now, which is to hit the like button and to watch one of the videos on the screen right now. I'll see you there.